Hello and welcome to the TMC Newsroom. My name is Rich Tehrani. On our program today is Michael Curry, who is the Chief of Business Development at Connexion One. His company provides outsourced services to companies and a number of different services, including call centers and that area.
Yep.
So how are you? Welcome to
All
the
right.
show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So tell me a little bit about the company.
Well, Connexion One is a full-service outsourced company. So we do voice, SMS text, chat, and email, both on an inbound and outbound contact center.
And those other channels have been growing?
Yes, absolutely growing. Our primary focus is at the USA Spanish-speaking marketplace. So that in every area, from housing to IT, in fact, every growth sector out there that's failing in the U.S., if you take a look at that sector in the Hispanic community, there is growth.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been like that for, I've been hearing that for 15 years.
Absolutely. I think, we'll see it again in the next election. We're starting to see some of the results coming out from the last census and, the growth across, from places of Texas and California. But, most of the communities north are also growing. So we find it's a great market to be in, to service that community. And
so companies come to you quite often to get to that market, right?
Absolutely. There's a little bit of an anomaly in that market. We don't primarily, our company that goes out looking for Spanish services primarily isn't trying just to serve that one language marketplace.
Right.
You take a look at the average bilingual person in the U.S., they'll use a Spanish split on a call center at least 50% of the time. So, our folks all the time, we find our bilingual folks will go into a call in Spanish and then come out of the call in English, in perfect English.
Oh, on the same call?
On the same call,
that's
absolutely. Yeah, the anomaly goes, and I see it all the time with my own family. You call into a call center and you hear that, that obviously you're going to be on hold for 10 minutes. You hang up the phone, you call back in, and you hit that para español numero cuatro, and you're right there. So it is interesting, out there. And the other thing we see out there is the fact that, especially when you look at the USA Hispanic population being 70% from Mexico, they'll use the Spanish split and actually do what we call dialect shopping. They know that there's a good chance that the call center could be in Mexico, or if it's even sitting up here, that most chances is going to be of Mexican descent. And so we find it a lot in the centers like warranty, things where someone needs a little push or a little favor. We see it all the time in systems actually shop for the dialect and look for that dialect that closely fits theirs and then continue on with the call.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and again, it's a growth market, and we're excited. But I guess one of the things, and we're seeing a lot of growth out there, is within marketplaces in Southern California, Southern Texas, where now it's there's hardly any English calls with these companies, and so they ran the English call centers out of India and out of the Philippines for many years, and although they've tried over there to speak Spanish, it's not going to happen. And so that good news is that business is coming back to the Americas, and that's truly where you want that business.
Absolutely. So in terms of the size of your agency, how big?
We run a 3,100 seat capacity call center. Actually, two of them down in Mexico. The main center is in Mexico City, sits pretty close to the airport and sits off the transportation hubs. 90% of our folks are, actually 90% of the people in Mexico City don't own a car for obvious reasons. So we strategically put in that area. So we have all the transportation hubs coming in there. Fully redundant center, from all the telco access and security, including on-site security and different access, methods to get inside.
Sure.
Very safe.
That's great. So in terms of growth, what's been going on the last few years?
Well, the last few years, I guess our biggest growth out there is General Motors. And so we are the primary Spanish call center for General Motors. In fact, we've kind of taken it to the second level with them, is we actually located our call center out on their location, their factory, in Toluca, Mexico.
How do you say OnStar in Spanish? Is it
OnStar in Spanish. So, not much of a difference.
Okay.
That TV commercial with Pepsi. So it'll be the same thing. But we're actually on their facility out there. We're growing across Latin America. We do all the warranty support in Spanish, and also now any technicians that call in from dealerships. It's kind of like myself. With if it gets technical, I have to use 100% English because you just don't.
Sure.
You grow up with the words. You're not trained
Sure.
for it. And the same thing happens in a dealership out there. You get into a technical part of a diesel engine, that conversation has to be in Spanish. So that's the one side. We also a manufacturer. We're a Microsoft Gold shop. We manufacture our own software used inside our center. And now we have pressure from the call center of the BPO community across the world to commercialize the software. And so we're, this is a software that...
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's the one that gives that one look and feel to an agent on the desktop.
Sure.
But most importantly, it keeps that agent ahead of the call. So it's not the typical ACD management software and reports. This is, what do you need to connect to a system, get that agent logged in, monitor, and if an agent's taking a Radio Shack call, one call, and taking a Best Buy call, the next call, the change it has to take. So we're one of the few, if not only, that actually manufacture the software out of our own necessity, and now we're taking it commercial.
Very exciting.
So a lot of growth there. We, a couple of phone manufacturers that we're set with, so when we deploy our services, we can deploy it on top of their telecommunications system.
So if I'm a company looking for BPO services, why do I want to work with you as opposed to competitors?
Well, if you're a company that has even as little as 1% need inside the Spanish language community, you definitely want to work with us.
Okay.
And it's all about the dialect. As I say, you can't look at Spanish as English, but in a way you can. I mean, if you're a company in Atlanta and you're servicing Atlanta, you certainly wouldn't hire a call center out of New York City to run your business.
Absolutely.
It wouldn't necessarily be the dialect, it would be the attitude. You take a look at the Mexican dialect Spanish, it's more of a cordial, kind of like a Southern English, good morning, good night, how are you, how are the kids doing?
Right.
Versus, what we're all used to on the East Coast, to tell me what you need and I'm going to hang up the call from here.
Right.
So, the dialect is what makes the call. So if any company out there is looking to use Spanish language, you have to make sure you cover the dialect to the intended audience. And 70%.
In that case, you're even injecting culture, right? I mean, it sounds like it's even more cultural.
It's probably more culture than people can possibly think out there. The community stack ranks itself, again in the U.S., 70% and growing, is of Mexican descent. And so I think today is Cinco de Mayo. You'll see it tonight.
Which is today, by the way, for those viewers at home that are popping open a Corona right now.
Absolutely.
While we're,
so it's important to have the right dialect. If you use the wrong dialect to the intended community, you're doing an injustice to yourself.
Sure.
Absolute injustice.
Interesting. One of the first call centers I toured back in '91 was in Ireland, and they actually said back then that the Irish callers into the U.S. were more successful than the American callers into the U.S., just showing that Americans would rather speak to someone with an Irish accent. It's kind of an interesting thing. So.
Absolutely. Why do you think a lot of people will use an English accent on their auto attendant to sound a little continental? It's a little comforting. I guess with a lot of us here in the U.S., maybe it's a little bit of that DNA from the homeland or something that's coming in. But that's a perfect example of what happens in the Spanish community. My wife is a perfect example. I mean, she'll, again, if she has to wait over 1 minute, she's calling in the Spanish split. And if she hears somebody on there that, from Mexico, I mean, she'll be on the phone with them for hours if she can, because they're talking about food and everything else.
Right.
So it's a cultural thing.
That's great.
So we can make a definite impact.
Okay. But even if you're not dealing with the Spanish market, you can help.
Yes, absolutely. We do all the English programs. Social media is growing leaps and bounds.
And you're doing, what are you doing there?
Well, we're not doing the typical maintain someone's face page. As I call it, kind of the light, heavy lifting out there. So, companies that have, 3,000 LinkedIn folks on their group, or, 20,000 Facebook. We're the company you can hire at a great rate, an educated person, sitting behind that desktop and sort through that. So if you need to go out and put all those contacts into certain things, make calls out to them, send out different things, we're the people that do that. So I'm the work behind it. And I can get it done effectively, I can get it done with an educated group of people.
Sounds like you can do a lot of things to help companies.
Absolutely. Help companies and help the growth here on both sides.
Well, thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thank you.
This was great. Thanks for being on the program. Pleasure.
Thanks.